For decades, it's been a race against time, Mother Nature, and a changing climate. A race to relocate the entire village of Newtok. One which residents say started out as a marathon, but has now turned into a sprint.
I mean, there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress behind it all, trying to make sure that our people need not worry.
It was only about 40 years ago that tribal administrator Andrew John says the Ninglick River carved its path more than a mile south of Newtok.
This river wasn't even visible.
But today, as a result of erosion,
it changes every year.
The river and its powerful current, now just 30 feet from devouring a place once called home, inching closer every day.
This is 2.5 miles wide now.
As the bank of the Ninglick River continues to crumble. In just the past few years, John says about 200 feet of land has been washed away. Real estate, which includes physical memories of his godparents' home, which was demolished along with several others as the river quickly approached.
One of the foundations fell into the river. All of this ground that you see where there's no grass that was growing was literally under the home.
And whether you walk, ride, or drive around town, the effects of melting permafrost and its impacts are hard to miss. From telephone poles that require 2x4s to remain somewhat upright, to the warped boardwalk connecting the village, and the quicksand-like tundra, which seems to be swallowing it.
You walk around, you step into one wrong place, and you're knee-deep in something.
A long list of reasons why this village on the eroding banks of the Ninglick River unanimously voted to relocate. That was 20 years ago, and the hurdles of such a major undertaking have been countless. But calm weather like today creates incremental opportunities.
This one might break, so.
For residents like Lisa Charles.
We're getting impatient to move.
She's one of about 140 people,
Hey, watch out.
roughly a third of the village, who are rushing to pack up their past
Hey, don't fall.
to invest in a future on more stable ground.
Getting too dangerous to live on this side.
Destined, at some point, for the new village site of Matarvik.
I think if we weren't able to move across this year, there's a chance that our homes will be flooded during the next, if there's another storm.
While Charles and her family are still waiting, others like Clifford Asungan are on their way.
We've never been there. We've never been to our new home, so we're kind of excited. We're in Ninglick. It's getting pretty close every year, so it's probably a good move.
Loading his boat with a little help from his friends.
Living in our old home, it's kind of like too old to live in.
Before starting the next chapter of his life, 9 miles away. He joins roughly 60 others, including Albertina Charles, who we first met about 2 years ago. Back then, she was in a constant state of worry.
I am scared for my kids, and I don't want to be here in fall time.
That fear remained until last week,
He's so small.
when she and her family finally made the move.
I feel good. I'm. Seems like I've been here forever now.
Just this summer, village officials say construction crews were able to build 13 new homes. Albertina's was one of them.
We're on the higher ground. It's safer. We don't have to worry about flood and erosion.
And while she's thrilled to be here,
It's beautiful living here, I tell you. We're safe.
concern for the hundreds of family and friends still living on the other side of the expanding Ninglick River remains. Yet, there's hope that everyone can be relocated before the sun sets on Newtok. In Newtok, Blake Essig, Channel 2 News.
In our next installment of Endangered Frontier, Alaska's changing climate, we go to Utqiagvik, Alaska's northernmost community.
Tracy Sinclair and Beth Verge went north to talk to people impacted by the lack of sea ice.
Well, Maria, Rebecca, for those of us living in urban areas, ice is likely an annoyance. But for those living along Alaska's north coast, it's vital to their way of life. We talked with 3 generations of lifelong residents about the changes they've seen and what the future holds. The Arctic Ocean, calm waters, amazing in its beauty. But it's what's not there that's remarkable.
We're the people of the ice and snow. There's no ice, there's hardly any snow.
The people who live in Alaska's northernmost community are first-hand witnesses to a changing climate.
It started off when I was in middle school, and that was when springtime, the ice would break up early, everything would melt.
Springtime doesn't come when it normally comes, and fall time doesn't come when it normally comes. It's like it's twisted a little bit.
This is what it looks like off the coast of Utqiagvik, mid-October 2019. I'm going to take you back to 1988 to show you the remarkable difference. The world's attention shifted to northern Alaska in early October 1988 when 3 gray whales got trapped in Arctic ice.
The ice formed this thick in 5 days. But and you could drive a truck over the ice.
Billy Adams, seen in that clip, was one of the people working to free those whales. In the 30 years since that memorable event, he's lived through many changes. Beginning, he says, in the late 80s.
One of the biggest changes that we saw early in August, September, we had over 90 bears that came ashore. And, we thought that was a 1-year thing or 2-year thing. And in the mid-90s, we thought, there's a little bit less ice, but not so much. But we noticed that was happening year to year. So we made some changes in our hunting.
There's a cycle, there's the spring whaling, there's the summer seal hunting and the walrus hunting, there's caribou hunting year-round.
Whale bones dot the landscape around Utqiagvik, visible reminders of how hunting is woven into the cultural and practical lives of the people.
They don't have a luxury or they don't have that opportunity to go to the store and get some produce or meat because sometimes it's not available, but sometimes it's just too expensive. So I think that's one really reliable resource that we have is our subsistence foods.
Without sea ice, whalers face rougher and more dangerous waves. And with warm waters off the coast,
it's very, very late.
The community waits.
It's about 3 weeks late, We started whaling here on the 21st of September, but we haven't landed a whale yet because of a lot of rough ocean. And the whales are just not here yet.
They say the whales are staying farther east near Kaktovik, but they know eventually the whales will arrive.
It's whaling season right now, so when they make strikes, we'll still get our muktuk.
But it's more than putting food on the table.
Our culture is just going to disappear. If there's no ice, no whaling and everything, we can't even go out anymore. We're the most impacted people on the ice. With no ice, we can't whale anymore, and there's no celebration and, nothing at all.
So with every new day, the people of Alaska's north face the challenges of change.
They've been adapting for many, many years now, and they're going to find ways to provide food for the elders that are still here, for their families and friends.
Native people, we've adapted to everything around us, so I think whatever changes, I think we'd be able to adapt to that. Now, at last check, the ice is still 400 miles north of Utqiagvik, and Billy Adams, who you saw in that story, says he doesn't think they're going to be able to hunt on the ice until mid-November this year.
Oh, wow.
And it's really just a waiting game as they wait for the whales to come through.
Tonight we start in the interior and take you deep below the surface to see why homes are sinking into the ground.
The building is literally sinking into the soil.
20 years ago, Dave Watts bought a fourplex in Fairbanks.
It settled more.
At $113,000, it seemed like a great deal.
The drawback is that it's sinking into the mud.
He loses more of his home every year,
You can get an idea here of how much settling has occurred.
leading to constant repairs.
If I put $100,000 into this building, I could get it fairly leveled up and stable for 15 years maybe.
Watts is one of hundreds of people impacted.
The house is kind of getting squished by the earth, I think.
This sinking house down the street is filled with college students.
None of these bedroom doors close anymore.
And huge cracks in the walls.
There's a thin hairline crack, and even in the last 6 months, it's gotten noticeably larger.
Destruction caused by a thawing permafrost throughout Alaska's interior, from bumpy roads to flooding at Kramer's Field, a refuge for migratory birds.
The most important thing for us is just to keep it cold.
To better understand the problem,
Okay, I'm gonna go in first.
we go 40 feet below the surface.
This is what permafrost in Fairbanks and interior Alaska looks like underground. This part was dug in 1963 and 1964.
The military dug this tunnel, an experiment created to see if permafrost could withstand an enemy's attack.
Now you can start to see these ice wedges are very commonly mocha brown in color.
Now it's a place where scientists can access 100,000 years of climate change.
Permafrost is anything that's frozen underground. It's part of soil, rocks, roots, and in our case, even animal bones.
An air conditioning system keeps the temperature here at a steady 26 degrees, despite temperatures that soar to 90 degrees plus during the summer. At the end of one tunnel is an example of what happens when the air warms up.
This isn't a catastrophic collapse. This just happened slowly. It's formed over time.
That's essentially what's happening as warmer temperatures have begun to impact Alaska's permafrost.
And the question isn't if climate is changing, the question is it changing out of whack with what we've seen over the last 100 or 1,000 years?
The evidence is undeniable.
This is part of a steppe bison.
Alaska's ground is sinking, some trees growing sideways.
This silt is about 70% ice content, and so when this type of permafrost thaws, yeah, it's mostly just muddy water.
Which begs the question, what's the plan, if any, for the future?
I don't know. I don't know, yeah. Keep living here and keep making repairs.
Oh, it's peach. It's beautiful today.
It is gorgeous.
I love it when the sun has these warm rays.
Describing the colors of a glacier, almost impossible.
When we start a morning tour, it's always a beautiful peach color. And by the time we come back, the sun will have moved over a little bit and you'll be getting more direct sunlight on the front of the glacier, the terminus.
Forever changing, moving, and more often these days, shrinking and receding.
Welcome to the Matanuska Glacier.
We join Sarah Kopczynski for a 2.5-mile hike.
I got my PhD on the Matanuska Glacier.
She seems to know every inch of this ice and every pool of blue.
These ponds are called kettle ponds.
Every crack, every surface.
Look how the sun's catching the scallops.
Isn't that gorgeous?
And every move. But she's keeping up with nearly daily changes here.
The amount of water coming out of the Matanuska Glacier is approximately 99 million gallons per hour. That's a lot of water.
It is a nonstop job.
The glacier's been receding since the 60s, the late 60s. In the late 60s, the glacier ice was up by the parking lot, and around 1968, it started retreating to its location today. That's about 10 meters of retreat each year, so it's about 32 feet each year.
Alaska is losing ice faster than any other glacierized region on Earth outside the ice sheets, and we're losing ice disproportionately fast here in Alaska.
This time-lapse video shows how quickly it's happening on Wolverine Glacier in the Kenai Mountains.
The changes we're seeing right now are accelerating.
Scientists say that on average, Alaskan glaciers lose 75 gigatons, that's 75 billion tons of ice every year. In just 2.5 years, that amount of glacier melt would fill Lake Tahoe.
By the end of this century, we will have lost somewhere between 30 and 70% of the ice volume in Alaska.
That loss also impacts sea levels, water temperature, and the marine life that depends on both.
We're supposed to be entering another glacial period, so the fact that we are actually warming is somewhat more astounding. And the changes we're seeing right now are accelerating.
The sun's warm sunlight can be undeniably beautiful, but also powerful. And with each step, there's something new to see on top of something less. Facing coastal erosion from climate change, some Alaska communities are choosing to move. Shaktoolik has chosen to stay for now.
A fall storms threaten the community on the Bering Sea, and there are concerns about what happens if the next big one strikes.
And the final installment of Endangered Frontier, Channel 2's Sean McGuire traveled to Shaktoolik to see what the community faces.
By plane, the village of Shaktoolik looks tiny. Surrounded by the Bering Sea on one side and the Tahumenik River on the other. Strong winds regularly hit the community, whose name means scattered things. But it's coastal erosion that poses the biggest threat.
We've lost maybe 75 to 100 feet of land on the ocean side.
In the 1970s, the community moved before from the risk of destruction.
You know, the '64 flood was probably one of the ones that woke the village up.
With former Mayor Eugenia Siksik, his wife, and Gary Bacoalok, we travel by four-wheeler to Oldside. Just a few miles away from where the current village is located. The skeletal remains of abandoned buildings will soon drop into the ocean. At the land's narrowest point, the greatest risk of erosion is evident.
We've become an island. I mean, we depend on the Tahumenik River for our fresh water.
That threat led to the community building a gravel berm in 2014 to hold off the encroaching ocean.
It's nothing sophisticated.
But everyone in town agrees it's just a temporary fix.
No, I don't think it'll hold. I think it's just a security blanket. At least show that we're trying to do something and give the water something to work on.
A storm in August proved that, painfully.
And 1/3 of it got eroded away.
The berm was reconstructed, but fall storms are coming more regularly and they hit with a terrifying ferocity. Huge driftwood logs are tossed around like toothpicks.
These storms, when they do occur, they hit at night, and a lot of times there's ice in the river, and would make it very, very dangerous to try to evacuate by boat.
Community members stay up with spotlights, watching to see if the water breaches the berm. Usually there would be a natural protection.
Sea ice does play a significant effect in helping to keep the water down.
The ice and slush can halt the potential for damage, and that's where climate change comes in.
Sea ice would start forming about this time of the year. Last year we didn't get any ice till it was February, and that was very thin, and it was wind blown, so it was always blown away.
Evacuation by plane during a storm is all but impossible. Constructing a rock wall like they have in Unalakleet is being discussed, as is building an evacuation road out and up to the mountains.
Go a long way toward comforting the people.
In the meantime, Shaktoolik faces the elements alone.
It would just take the perfect storm to wipe us out during, one night.
In the event of a real emergency, the community would gather here, inside the cafeteria at the local school. But there are some doubts the school's walls could hold. So, with the risks evident to everyone, why not relocate? Fred Segunik, the president of the Shaktoolik Tribal Council, explains.
But early on we found out when we started using the word relocate in public that funding agencies for capital projects kind of back off and not wanting to invest any kind of infrastructure because of possible relocation.
That means diesel fuel tanks used to generate electricity weren't replaced, even though they were well out of date.
Very real potential for ruptures. And when we realized that, we as a community decided to go ahead and try to stay and fight.
That has meant construction of a new health clinic this year, and new tanks are on their way. Those improvements aren't the only reason the community doesn't want to leave.
You have the river there, and then you have the ocean, which are very rich in subsistence resources like fish and marine mammals.
But everyone knows the inevitable move to the foothills is approaching.
I like living here, but I think for the future of our children and their children, it might be better to just move.
Which could give this vulnerable village and its 250 people the sense of security it needs.
We all have a right to safety, to live our lives free of fear.
Reporting from Shaktoolik, Sean Maguire, Channel 2 News.